Oh, the 90s, a time before the Avengers were a household name, and when Marvel actually had to try their hardest to capture the audience's attention. During that time, one superhero group in particular caught the attention of many, the X-Men. The show was fairly complex for a kids' show, diving into deep and heavy social and political issues while trying to make it entertaining for kids. Even when watching it now, I was caught off guard by just how brutal the original show could be at times, facing all kinds of issues like oppression, equal rights, slavery, and so much more. Needless to say, the OG show will remain a classic for years to come, as it is as relevant today as it was back then. So, what does this have to do with X-Men 97? Well, the original show, while giving us an ending, didn't really tie up any of the loose ends in its finale. It felt more like a cliffhanger than anything, which is why in 2021, Marvel announced that they'd be making a show that would be a direct continuation of the 90s series. Now, here's the problem. I know that some of you are sleeping on this masterpiece, so let me try to convince you why this show is a work of art. Now, since this is a continuation of the original series, I know that some of you may be concerned by the fact of whether or not you will have to watch the original. The fact is that not much knowledge of the old show is really required for you to start watching 97. While it helps if you've seen the show to understand minor references that the characters make, you'll still be able to follow along just fine. In the first episode, the show practically gives you all the information needed to continue this show without needing to refer back to the original. Now, if you know nothing about the X-Men whatsoever, then I'll give you a quick summary. The show focuses on a group of mutants called the X-Men, a group that focuses on saving humanity. In a world where humanity despises their kind, the X-Men still focuses on helping everyone, whilst trying to get the idea around that mutants and humans should be treated equally. Now that already is quite a depressing premise. But since the original show was made for kids, they had to carefully explore the themes of the story without making it too dark. However, since 97 is now being made for more mature audiences, they don't really have to worry about those boundaries anymore. But while there aren't any more boundaries, they still manage to capture the essence of the original show, which is exactly how a continuation of a show should be, something that doesn't completely alienate its core audience, whilst also making the show engaging for newcomers. It has something that many modern shows misunderstand: maturity. 97 isn't filled with meaningless sex scenes or swearing. It treats you like an adult, while still having that charm that the original had, proving to you that the original show that the fans loved never left. It has only grown up with them. The fights in this show aren't gory death battles, they retain that fun energy that the show has always had. The fights in the show have an excellent balance of knowing when to have fun, campy fights, and when to have serious, over-the-top action brawls. In fact, one of the most fun fights in the entire show has to be when Jubilee and Sunspot get transported into a video game, and the animation switches in and out of these retro Street Fighter-esque graphics. It fits so well for the setting, and really gives you that 90s fighting game vibe that it's going for. In the fights, a lot of the characters play around with their powers quite a bit, which made the fights a lot more interesting to watch. For example, Cyclops will at times use his laser beams to not only neutralize enemies, but he'll also use them to get across the room a lot quicker. Everyone in this show uses their powers creatively and effectively, and it makes the fights more fresh and creative, to the point where the fights don't feel repetitive or samey. Each fight in this show feels more unique than Lost, and they always find a way to spice it up every time. Hell, some of the best fights in the show are when one of the X-Men team up with one another in a fight. They'll use their powers to assist one another, and sometimes they'll use them for really cool combos. What I'm trying to say is that none of the fights feel like mindless action. Each fight feels like the characters put thought and weight into their attacks. It's also helped by the fact that the animation in the show is incredibly good. Watching this after Invincible Season 2 honestly feels like whiplash because of how vastly different the quality of the animation is. While I don't think that the animation in Invincible is as flawed as people say it is, I still think that it is undeniable that the difference in quality is vast. I know it's a tireless comparison, but it's worth mentioning just to prove how quality in this medium makes a big difference. I will admit that when I originally heard that the show was going to be using a mix of 3D and 2D animation, I was fairly skeptical because of how weird What If's animation looked. But I think it's safe to say that my worries were put to rest once I finished the first episode. It retains that classic look of the series, but with a more modern touch to it. Everything down to the lighting, to the detailed environments, the show's animation goes beyond simply replicating the original's art style. With the use of digital tools allowing for more smoother and dynamic fights, the animation in this show is simply incredible. And the same can be said about the characters. Growing up, I used to think that the X-Men looked like a pretty mundane cast of characters. But one day I decided I'd give it a chance, and I went to watch Dark Phoenix, unaware of its poor reception.
Stay away from me! Stay away from me!
Which practically sealed my opinion on the X-Men until this year, when I decided to give this show a shot. I wasn't expecting a lot, but the characters all had so much depth to them that I was shocked to see that the X-Men as characters are not only intriguing, but fun to watch. Everyone always said that in the movies, Cyclops is a bland and boring character, to the point where it feels like the showrunners purposely went out of their way to show just how awesome and badass he really is. Although, if I do have one criticism to make about the characters, it would be the case of how some characters get more special treatment than others. While it's clear that they do try to develop everyone in this show, it's apparent how much more development some characters get rather than others. I understand why Wolverine would take such a huge back seat in the show, because of how much the movies have revolved around him. I still think it would have been nice for him to at least get a bit more development than what we got. The same can be said for Sunspot, the newest addition to the team. I'm usually pretty lenient when it comes to criticizing how much development characters get when the show focuses on a whole group of characters, but for someone who is the newest addition to the cast, I would have hoped for him to get some of the limelight this season. I understand why they did it for Wolverine, but for Sunspot, some of the character work felt like it needed a bit more time in the oven. That's not to say he's a bad character by any means, he serves as a great self-insert for the audience, similar to how Jubilee was in the first season of the original show. In fact, it's so similar to Jubilee's role in the first season that the show even outright admits how similar it is at points. But the difference is how Jubilee had a bit more depth in the first season than Sunspot did. They do have an arc that is established from the first episode about how reluctant he is to talk about or show off his powers, and while it does pay off his arc near the end of the show, it feels like they did the bare minimum to develop it. Other than those two characters, the characterization for everyone this season is very strong, especially when it comes to Magneto. Watching his struggle to be the man that Charles wanted him to be was by far some of the best moments in the show. You can tell that he's trying his damnedest to make Charles proud, and the conflict we get out of it is great. The same goes for Rogue. In the original series, we saw glimpses into how depressing her life can be without powers, but here it is pushed straight to the forefront in this season. Rogue's inner conflict causes a lot of issues, not only for herself, but for her relationships with others too. Seeing her character evolve and change throughout the season was something that gripped you by the throat. Everyone this season is pushed to their limits, and seeing how it all plays out, especially in the second half of the season, was, needless to say, enthralling. We also finally got some representation for Nightcrawler. The first time he appears, he is dripping in personality, and every scene we get out of him is gold. The more I saw of him, the more he became one of my favorite characters in the show. Whenever there's something dark or intense going on, Nightcrawler would usually be the character to add some levity to the scene. Don't get it twisted though, the story in this show is pretty fucking heavy. Each episode does a pretty good job at getting you invested enough to want to binge the entire show. You'll never get bored because in most episodes there's always some kind of twist or revelation in the story to keep you hooked and desperate to watch more. And it always keeps building up to this massive event after massive event. To give you some perspective into just how insane this season gets, I'll say that this season is basically X-Men's Shibuya incident from Jujutsu Kaisen. The plot progression in this show is amazing. Every episode manages to get you on the edge of your seat with breathless anticipation for the credits to come so you can finally get time to process what you just witnessed. There will be many instances of foreshadowing that sometimes you may not even fully understand until you rewatch the show. And I'm just gonna say it now, this is a show that benefits from a rewatch. While I usually rewatch media more than once if I'm going to review it, it's rare that I actually recommend you to watch something more than once. But this is a special case, where I'd recommend watching it again to appreciate the show more. One thing I would like to mention before I close this video off is the music. My god, is the music something special. Something that the music and visuals have in common is that they both mainly serve to enhance the story. It's surprising just how memorable and effective the soundtrack is with what little songs there are. The music ranges from these orchestral battle anthems to some more somber tracks with the occasional synthwave in there. The music goes practically hand in hand with the plot. I mentioned earlier how each episode felt like it was building to something bigger and more grand in scale, and part of that was reinforced by the music. The orchestral battle anthems I was talking about help give you that sense of scale and what it's all building to. Even the more somber tracks can still carry the same weight as the more dramatic scores in the soundtrack. The characters could be sharing a heartbreaking moment, and then the music will come in just to break your heart further. Speaking of characters, each character is given quite a unique track that defines their character. For example, Storm is given this mystic track that is later combined in the track with this godlike orchestral piece. The track fits extremely well for her character, and acts as a memorable one too. Everything about the presentational aspect in the show is top tier, and not only that, but you also get some great characters, an enthralling story, and themes that are well explored and relevant when looking at our current political climate. So, listen up. If you like good animation, good storytelling, or just good media in general, then there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be watching this show. All the episodes are out, and it won't take you very long to watch it all. The show has 10 episodes, all clocking in at around 30 minutes each. Binging this show should probably take you around a few hours, but if you are someone with a busy schedule, then this show is also for you. I went into this show for the animation whilst expecting the same MCU slop, and came out of it having experienced one of the best superhero shows I've ever seen. This doesn't feel like something Marvel has churned out. This is something that has been created with love and passion behind it, and that kind of passion should be rewarded. We need to show Marvel that shows like this are something that should be the standard for them, not a diamond in the rough. So whether you're a longtime fan of the X-Men, or someone who doesn't really know them at all, I hope you'll get as much enjoyment out of this show as I did, because the X-Men are back, and they are better than they have ever been. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, then why not support me by subscribing or joining my Discord to interact with the community. Both are linked in the description below. I also appreciate the massive support that you've all been showing me recently. It's been pretty hard to make content at the moment due to some pretty heavy personal shit that has been going on, but I have been working hard to give you all content to enjoy, so I appreciate every bit of support that you have been giving me. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you on my next video. Goodbye.